So you've probably heard me say many times that Andrew McCarthy, is the gold standard when it comes to legal commentary. And the reason I keep saying that is because Andrew McCarthy is the gold standard when it comes to legal commentary. His take on what is going on in the legal world is always incredibly incisive and fair, right down the middle. He is a former federal prosecutor and a contributing editor at National Review and a terrific writer. Andy, thank you so much for coming on. It's really good to talk to you.
Drew, it's my pleasure. Great to be with you.
So I can't help noticing that for 230 some odd years, nobody raided the home of a former president or sent armed officers in to search the home of a former president, and then they did. What the hell is going on?
Well, I guess we have a little more clarity because we've seen now that there's reporting that, we're going to get this warrant if we haven't gotten it already as we're speaking now. It's been described in the media. It looks like there's a good bit of classified information that was, or at least whether it's still classified is going to be a big issue, obviously, because we're dealing, as it would come to my attention if I were trying to prosecute this case, we're dealing with my suspect happens to be the one official in the United States government who can declassify anything he wants to declassify. So whether it's in fact classified information or not is an issue. But I've gotten in trouble, Drew, with using the word pretextual. Apparently, there's a whole glossary of things we're not allowed to. So we can't say raid, we can't say spy. So pretextual, I'm learning, is another one of these loaded words. I think that they are mainly trying to make a case on Trump related to January 6th. And I think if you look at the timeline of what they've done in the 6 weeks in which this Mar-a-Lago search is included, that becomes clear. But when I say they have a closet agenda that's more important than what they're ostensibly doing, that does not mean I'm saying that they either lied to the court or that the classified information is unimportant to them. I just think they wanted a reason to get into Trump's residence and root around for things that might be helpful to them while they're frenetically trying to make a January 6th case.
So if the judge says, yes, you can, classified information justifies a search, and they go in looking and have a list of classified documents, they can also look at Melania's underwear and anything else they want?
Well, everybody does hide evidence of crime in Melania's underwear. You hadn't heard. So here's the way the law works. What you have to have in order to lawfully enter somebody's premises is probable cause of a crime and probable cause that evidence of the crime will be in the place you seek to search. That's what you need to get a warrant to enter somebody's home.
Okay.
So if you have evidence of a crime and evidence that probable cause of the crime and that the evidence will be there, that gets you in the door. Then what the law says is if law enforcement people are legitimately on the premises conducting a search and they see other information that is obviously criminal, even though it is outside the parameters, the four corners of the warrant's permission, what the judge has said you can look for, they're not required to turn a blind eye to it. They can grab it and seize it. So my best example of this, Drew, is let's say I have a notorious robbery that's been committed in my jurisdiction, and I have a suspect in mind. I'm not sure if he did it, but I'm dead certain that he's a small-time drug dealer. I write a warrant for narcotics trafficking because I know if the agents go in and they find a gun and a screwdriver and a mask all wrapped up in a bag, they can take that because it's obvious evidence of a crime. Whereas, by the way, if I wrote the warrant and I guessed that I would find the robbery tools in there, and it turned out the agents didn't find them, then I'd have to sit in court during the trial and hear a defense lawyer say, isn't it a fact that you told the court you were going to find all this evidence of burglary? And what happened? You didn't find anything, right? So that's the rule. Basically, if they're in the place legitimately and they see something that's obviously criminal, they can take it. But, it's got to be obviously criminal. And not everything is. It's one thing to say if you find a gun with an obliterated serial number or you find a pile of heroin on the table, that's, pretty obvious. Documents are another matter. And I think that's probably why we've heard so much about this Presidential Records Act, which is kind of enmeshed in the public discussion of the classified information. But I think it's important that we separate it out, because the way the media has covered this, I think people don't realize this. The Presidential Records Act is not a criminal statute. You can't get a search warrant for a violation of the Presidential Records Act, because to get a search warrant, you need probable cause of a crime. In our system, we don't think it's important enough to use the intrusive method of a search warrant unless you've actually done something so serious that we punish it under the criminal law.
So your theory is that what they're really looking for is not classified documents, is something to do with January 6th. What could they find that would be important to them about January 6th?
Yeah, just to be clear, I have no doubt that they're interested in taking back the classified information, but I think they're going to have some time proving that Trump didn't declassify it. But putting that on the side, it seems to me that watching the 9/11, not the 9/11 committee, the January 6th committee, watching them do their docudrama series this summer, got the left very agitated that Attorney General Garland wasn't doing enough and being aggressive enough on the Trump prosecution, which they don't understand why Trump hasn't been drawn and quartered, yesterday. So they don't understand why Garland hasn't indicted him yet. And what the January 6th committee is homing in on, which I can tell now that the Justice Department is homing in on, is this theory, Drew, that Trump and those around him were engaged in two conspiracies. One, to obstruct the congressional count of electoral votes. And the second one, which is a really kind of insidious statute, is conspiracy to defraud the United States. Now, when you hear the word defraud, I think when Congress first eons ago enacted this statute, what they meant was what we ordinarily think of as fraud, which is stealing money. But in the 20th century, the Supreme Court put a lot of elasticity in this statute, and it basically allows you to prosecute any scheme or any deceptive scheme that would frustrate the government from performing one of its proper tasks, which is a lot of room for prosecutors to criminalize stuff that frankly Congress hasn't gotten around to criminalizing, right? So I think what they're going to articulate as a conspiracy against the United States is a scheme to undermine the state certification of electoral votes and therefore frustrate Congress's ability to count state certified electoral votes.
Wow. I mean, that to me, the fact that this has never been done before seems to me to raise the bar. Let me ask you this. You've always been really circumspect about your comments of people, the actual people in the DOJ and the FBI. You've worked with a lot of people, you've known a lot of these people, and you've always sort of given them the benefit of the doubt. At this point, the FBI seems to have run a case, an investigation of Donald Trump based on information from the Steele dossier they knew was false. They seem to have covered up Hunter Biden information that they knew was true. At least some of them have done that. They lied to the FISA court to get a warrant to tap Carter Page's phone. They investigated the PTA. I mean, they're investigating parents as if they were domestic terrorists because they don't want their kids, taught that they're the wrong gender. At this point, do you look at this DOJ and think that the people are justified in at least feeling suspect that it's an arm of the administration?
Oh, yeah. I think they've lost the benefit of the doubt. I've argued that I think the national security mission should be taken away from them, foreign counterintelligence mission, because I think it's changed the culture of the Bureau, which was a pretty good law enforcement outfit.
Yeah.
But I think the culture of things got changed. I don't think anybody meant to do this, but I think when we had the wave of jihadism starting in the 90s, the Bureau and the Justice Department derivatively became more like an intelligence agency than a police force. And they're not only different skills, they're different protocols. I mean, the thing with FISA is a good example. You go to get a FISA warrant like the Carter Page warrant that you just talked about. If you lie to the court, no one's ever going to find out about that. If the court doesn't catch you, that's all classified. It's never good. You're not like trying to build a criminal case. You're just trying to monitor, right? So the only due process a person ever gets is, does the FBI and the Justice Department tell the truth to the court? And if they get it by the court, then they can do whatever they want, right? In the criminal justice system, we hope we get honorable people as prosecutors and police, but we don't bank on it. So what keeps people honest is the fact that your work is going to be checked. Like when I go for a criminal search warrant, if I lie to the court, I have to turn that over in discovery once I bring a case. So I know the defense lawyers are going to be poring over it and the defense investigators are going to be poring over it. And if I have done a shoddy job or if I've lied to the court, that's going to be found out. And when people know that they're going to be caught when they do bad stuff, they tend to not do bad stuff. Whereas, in the FISA system, that's not how it works. So, I think in this national security stuff where everything is classified, you start to get this way of thinking that your efforts to protect the country are much more important than those little rules that we deal with in the criminal justice system, the constitutional protections, because I'm here to protect the country. I'm here to save mankind. And I do think that is not a healthy mindset to be in on the police side. So if I could do, it's easy to describe these problems. And by the way, Drew, it's not just you and me describing it, right? The Justice Department's Inspector General has written hundreds of pages of reports on FISA abuse by the FBI. The FISA court has condemned the FBI for systematic abuse of FISA. So this is not just like, right-wing guys railing about the FBI. Actually, the FBI used to be a lot more popular among the right wing than it was among the other side. But I think that I don't think anyone intended for this to happen. We all thought that terrorism was the most important thing we were dealing with because it was in that point in time. And we thought a lot about how wise is it from a national security standpoint to treat terrorism as a criminal problem. But what I don't think we spent enough time thinking about was, what does treating terrorism as a criminal problem do to the quality of justice in the criminal justice system? And I think that 30-year experiment, unfortunately, has not turned out well.
That's a really interesting point. When you talk about finding evidence that Trump wanted to overturn the election, you could just ask him. He'd tell you that. It seems to me that when you send armed men into a former president's home, it really does stink of like a tin pot dictatorship. What is the idea? Wouldn't they have to find something of incredibly grotesque illegality to soothe the minds of the half of the electorate that voted for Donald Trump, that made him president of the United States? What could in their imaginations, in Merrick Garland's imagination, what could he possibly be thinking could be a good outcome of this? It seems to me like he's throwing a match into a tinderbox.
Yeah, but I wonder how much people are thinking about what's a good outcome, Drew, because I knew Merrick Garland in the 90s when I was doing terrorism cases. I thought he was a really good guy. I thought he was like the adult in the room in the Clinton Justice Department. He was a real strong law enforcement guy. He's a left of center guy, but as far as law and order was concerned, that stuff doesn't generally matter. And I thought he was a very solid institutionalist as far as the Justice Department was concerned. So the reason I say that is the Merrick Garland I know, if an agent or a prosecutor came into him and said, you know what I think we ought to do? I think we ought to send the FBI out to investigate America's parents, because this whole thing of dissenting about the woke stuff in the curricula, I think they seem like domestic terrorists to me. The Merrick Garland I used to know would have looked at that person like he had three heads and say, what are you, crazy? Are you nuts? And yet the Merrick Garland who runs the Justice Department did it. So to my mind, there's what they know is a good or a bad idea. And then there's what they do because they're under pressure from the Democratic base. And what I keep hoping is that a lot of the stuff that Garland is doing is as bad as I think it is mainly theatrical. And that when push comes to shove, they won't actually file these charges, which would take the country, I think, to a not good place. But if you ask me, do I think that Trump's going to be indicted? I would say 7 chances in 10 he's going to be indicted.
Really?
And I don't think it's over. They may add classified information charges now that they've done this, but I think they are gunning to get him and Eastman. And I don't like saying this because I know a lot of these guys, but they're trying to make a case on these guys on January 6th.
Does that prevent Trump from running for office? Because I think it would get him elected.
Nope.
It doesn't.
No, in fact, one of the more hilarious things that came up this week is they think, in one of these classified information statutes, which is a 3-year penalty, one of the provisions in the penalty section is disqualification from holding future office. Now, that can't apply to Trump because the qualifications for the presidency are set forth in the Constitution. And by the way, the disqualification for the presidency is set forth in the Constitution, too. To be qualified, you have to be over 35 and a natural-born citizen. They're very minimal qualifications. And to be disqualified, you have to be impeached by the House of Representatives and convicted by the Senate. And disqualification is part of the penalty. So the black letter law here is that when the Constitution sets forth the conditions, they can't be amended or changed by statute. You have to amend the Constitution. But just think about how loopy it would be if you said, if you commit seditious conspiracy or you're a multiple murderer, you're still qualified to be president. But if you violate this 3-year mishandling classified information statute, why, we've got you now. So I think the whole discussion of it was ridiculous. So the short answer, now that I've given the long-winded answer, the short answer is Trump can run for president. He could run for president from prison.
Huh.
I don't know that, people would elect him, but, he's not disqualified as a matter of law, although they keep trying to come up with theories why he should be disqualified as a matter of law. So, for someone who has never been in the Justice Department, for someone who's never been in the legal business, for ordinary American, basically, looking at this, there's something truly terrifying about this as they spend $80 billion to increase an IRS and give IRS agents guns, which I love the idea of accountants with guns. Just what we need. It's terrifying. Yeah, but it's terrifying. Are you terrified, or do you think like this is a bad turn in the road, but it can be turned back? I think it's going to take a long time and a lot of commitment to turn it back. And the reason is, and I think, Drew, this is just like one iteration of something on our side that we have dealt with progressives for a long time, which is that progressives, they obviously like to have people who are progressives in power. But what they really like is the instrumentalities of government to further their cause, whatever instrumentality they control at the moment and is ready to hand. And it's hard to imagine a more powerful instrumentality than the legal system. So I think, on our side, we would like to see a more robust Bill of Rights and a more robust commitment to liberty. But we're dealing with people who not only think that they know it all and know what the good is, they are more than willing to push the envelope as far as it can be pushed with the procedural levers of government, and not just in the criminal justice system, in every single place where they run an administrative agency of any kind, which is why I think the only way you can really reverse this is you have to strip down the administrative state to something that's much more modest than what we have now.
Wow. Andy McCarthy writes at National Review, former federal prosecutor, the best legal writing in the country for my money. Andy, it's great talking to you, and thank you very much. Really interesting.
Drew, hope to see you soon.
Yeah, likewise. For more delicious Klavan-y goodness, like and subscribe to the Andrew Klavan Podcast.